Chat with MEA, and I'm here to welcome you to a Fireside Chat on radical transitions with MEA co-founder and Chief Experience Officer, Christine Sperber, and MEA Mindfulness Director, Teddi Dean, and our special guest, Stacy Peralta. I am so excited for today. It's going to be so great. So by show of hands, how many of you are here for the first time with us on one of our calls? I recognize a lot of faces, but welcome to the new faces. Glad you're here. We like to get these calls started with a little engagement on the chat button. If you can look at the bottom of your screen and find the chat button, just let us know, type in, where are you calling in from? We love to get an idea of how do these events, it's all around the world. Santa Fe, Dallas, Texas, New York, Sonoma, Portugal, great, Boulder, woo! It's moving so fast, I can't even get, well, welcome everybody. It's going to be a really wonderful interview, and we will have time at the end or the second half of this call to allow you to ask questions. So when the time comes, use your reactions button also at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand so that we can see it. But for now, I'd like to bring up Teddi Dean, who is our, I'm going to spotlight you here, Teddi. Teddi is our mindfulness director here at MEA, and he's going to start this call with a guided meditation. Thank you, Teddi.
Thank you, and what a pleasure it is to be able to do this with my old friend, mentor, and old skateboard manager, Stacy Peralta. I really appreciate you carving out the time for us here, for us to really offer something a little bit different than what we've offered the last 5 years here at MEA, but all of us knowing that all of us people that were involved in surf and skate culture in the 70s and the 80s are all in midlife too. And every so often we need a bit of help to kind of navigate what midlife is all about. So I really appreciate you committing to the workshop and committing to this day where we'll chat about radical transitions and maybe even a little bit about Charlie's Angels.
Oh, God.
All right, go ahead and we're just going to do a very short meditation. Just go ahead and take a comfortable seated position. And we'll just do a few minutes here, but just to settle in, I know most of us probably had a pretty busy morning. So just simply take a moment and just recognize your body. Just take a moment and recognize the container that you're in. And we'll start here at the ring of the bell. So just settle in to this marvelous body that you've been given. Use your sense of awareness to kind of wash through the body so that we're experiencing this body in its whole totality, and we're not really just thinking about the body, but we're feeling the felt sense and the feeling tone of this body itself. The physicality of the body in time and space. And to use some of the physicality of the body, like the weight of the body, to help us ground. To feel the weight of the body upon the chair that you're sitting on, to feel the feet placed down upon the earth, and to just give ourselves a moment to not only settle within the body, but to settle upon the earth and to experience the support that's being offered here at this moment. And as we settle in a bit more deeply, we can start to bring our awareness to the breath. And no real need to change anything with the breath, no need to manipulate the breath, but just place your awareness upon the gentle ebb and flow of this body breathing. Relax the tummy. And just allow yourself to kind of pull yourself into more of a natural rhythm. To let everything go, all the busyness of the morning, put it all down for a moment to come back to something a little more closer to who and what we really are. The in-breath as the in-breath, the out-breath as the out-breath. To simply remember that we are a part of the natural fabric of life itself. We allow our thoughts to come and go freely. No real need to attach or believe any sort of particular thought, but just let the mind do what the mind is doing, just as this body breathes itself. We breathe our way right back to present moment experience to prepare ourselves for a wonderful, wonderful interview and chat, and for all of us to share an offering of wisdom to one another. Bring our hands to prayer in front of the heart center. May all beings find their own natural rhythm. May all beings continue to recognize this foundation of joy that comes along with just having a human experience. May all beings drop into grace, and may all beings be free of suffering. Namaste.
Namaste. Could we add to that, may my dogs please behave for the entire hour?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, I would love to mention that my baby sister is on this call. Teeter Sperber, I love you. It is great to see you. So many faces that I'm happy to see here. So thanks all for joining. Stacy, thank you for taking time out of your schedule. We are going to cover a little bit about how very busy you are and how you got there. But I'd like to start actually by asking Teddi if he would tell us a little bit about your history together, because you two are culture shakers. And there's just this sense that came over me, Teddi, in your intro that's like, holy shit, we're the grown-ups now. Like, we're the grown-ups. This is cool. So give us a little bit of the history.
Me?
Yeah.
Well,
Stacy up.
I was really more confetti in all of this, but I was certainly around to witness all the greats, really. And you know, this was a time where, you know, skateboarding, you know, being raised in Huntington Beach at a time where Huntington Beach was very different than what it is now. Huntington Beach was really a surf kind of, you know, for lack of a better term, kind of a surf ghetto. There was downtown Huntington Beach was all full of surf shops. Skateboarding and surf culture was really what all of us kids, me and my friends, were into. Not so much baseball and football and things. So there was this kind of subculture that was developing that was really, for quite a while at my involvement in it, considered an outlaw culture, really an outlaw sport in a way. But we were all good kids. We really were. And it gave us an identity. It gave us an immense amount of creativity and freedom. It gave us a sense of community. And I kind of thrived at it early on. And I through Skatopia skateboard park in Buena Park, I got on my first team, which was Vans Tennis Shoes, which was a touring demo team. And we mostly did demos at different county fairs, a lot of schools at the time, different amusement parks like Magic Mountain and Knott's Berry Farm. And I did that for quite a few years. And
Was it
I
like
wanted to
like Puppet Show and Spinal Tap?
kind of, yeah, yeah, it was pretty fun time. And I wanted to compete more. I remember that I was competing, but I wanted to compete more. And the only team I wanted to be on was Stacy's team. And at the time he was just kind of formulating. You can jump in here too, Stacy, if you wish. He was kind of just putting the Powell and Peralta team together. There was Ray Bones Rodriguez, and then and who was the little blonde amateur that I was such good friends with? It was Pre-Cab that lived, I believe he still lived in Santa Barbara. One of the
Jazzy Rakowski.
Yeah. And I just I don't know, I think I kind of stalked and just basically after maybe 2 years or something, I think Stacy just kind of gave up and let me and David Z get on the team at the same time, I remember.
Boy, do you write yourself off. You were a very talented young man. Let me just say really briefly, I was one of the very first skateboard champions of the world before Teddi even began. Skateboarding became popular in 1973 with the birth of the urethane wheel. I had been skateboarding up until that time, and because I had been riding for so long, when the sport emerged, I was at the front of the line for sponsorships. So I was sponsored by a company called Gordon and Smith, which at the time in the 70s was the largest skateboarding company in the world. When my career started to peak, I realized that I had a very short shelf life. And I realized I need to do something if I want to stay in this industry. So rather than having a signature model skateboard, which I had with Gordon and Smith, I realized I had to be a part of a company. I tried to get Gordon and Smith to incorporate me into their company. They didn't see any reason for it. So I left and I formed a company with a man named George Powell, and we formed Powell Peralta. And so I went from being an athlete to a young entrepreneur. And that was my first major transition in my life. And in building that company, I put together a skateboard team, or started to, and Teddi was one of my original skaters on that team. He was a very talented kid, but that team would eventually include Tony Hawk and Rodney Mullen, Steve Caballero, Mike McGill, and these are some of the most historical figures in skateboarding history. And they were all together on that team for about 15 years while we built the company from 5 employees to 150 employees, selling about $30 million worth of product worldwide. So it was an education unto itself.
Stacy, how old were you when you saw that with Gordon and Smith, with that they weren't interested in making you part of the company? You were really young then.
20.
20. Okay.
Yeah. But I was so eager to be involved in the business that I had my own logo designed for my model because I didn't like the logo that they had done. And I also convinced Larry Gordon, who was the owner of the company, to let me conceive and produce my own advertisements, which he did remarkably, and which we ended up doing. I can't believe he did that, but that was the line he drew. He wouldn't go any further with me. But funny thing is, and I'm not saying this to, blow smoke or to, puff myself up, but years later, we would be at a trade show and Powell Peralta was now far bigger than Gordon and Smith. And Larry Gordon came up to me one day, and he was way older than I was. And he goes, I want to tell you, you really pissed me off. I go, what do you mean? He goes, you're the biggest mistake I ever made. Because I should have listened to you. And I couldn't believe a man of his stature would say that to me. And I was, because I was indebted to him. Without him, I don't know where I would have gone in my life, because he gave me the best career that a skateboarder could have at the time, because he was a legitimate business. He was not a former drug dealer who wanted to become legitimate, which was a lot of people in that business were back then. He was a really good businessman, and he took very good care of me.
Wow.
So yeah, so I was 20 years old, Teddi, when I made that transition, 2021.
Stacy, I have some questions for you about transitions, if I might jump in here. So, the MEA, we do a lot of work around transitions and midlife transitions. We have people, all of the transitions that come with midlife, from physical, job change, divorce, empty nest, tons of transitions. We see people come to us every day, every kind of week in, week out. particularly around identity tied to their work. And you've done this so many times successfully. So do you have any reflections you can share with us about moving from, because that's a really young age, 20 is really young time to be moving from, world champion skateboarder into the business side, even though it was a transition you knew you wanted to make. Was there difficulty in making that transition? And then from there into TV and film, like, you're a master at transitions. What light can you shine for us on that?
Well, first of all, you have to be careful of falling in love with your identity. And that's one of the most difficult things of leaving a transition, because when you leave a transition, your question is, well, who am I now? And if you're locked into that former identity is going to hold you hostage to your future. It's going to hold your future hostage. And so you first of all have to get a hold of that. But even before that, let me say what I had to really ask myself, do I love doing what I'm doing anymore? And the truth was, I didn't. I wanted to do something new. And if I didn't love what I was doing, I couldn't propel myself to do something new. And I had to be honest with myself about that when I made that transition. There is something else I love that I want to get into. And in going to that new direction, not knowing if I could even do it, if I even had any talent for it, I knew I had to take that chance, and I knew I had to give up my old identity and move into this new one. And I didn't have a problem. I don't know. I've thought about this so many times. I don't know why I didn't have a problem giving that identity up, but I didn't. I liked being empty again for some reason. I don't know why, but I did. But do you want me to keep going? Because I do have something to say on this.
Yeah, please keep going. I'm fascinated. I'm sure we all are. Like, everyone's nodding along.
I've thought so much about this. 15 years ago, I learned a new form of surfing called kiteboard, SUP surfing. It took me a long time to learn it, and I spent a lot of months in what's called the kook phase of not knowing if I was ever going to get this thing, and having to realize that I can still really suck at something. And I'm a former professional athlete. I'm trying this new sport, and I'm not good at it. That was not comfortable for me. People that knew me saw me doing it and went, wow, he sucks. And I knew that, and I felt bad about that, but I wanted to learn it. So I did learn it. I became very good at it. I knew something happened in that transition, but I was never able to articulate it until years later when I learned to kiteboard. Now, this wasn't only difficult, but it was terrifying. Really a scary thing to learn, because that kite's very powerful. Well, when I finally figured that out after a very long 1.5-year transition, I realized the magic in life is to put yourself in uncertainty and remain in uncertain places and insecure. That's where the magic is. The magic is not mastery. The magic is that brilliant time where you're going from, I don't know what I'm doing, to I want to get here and I don't know if I can get there. And there's something magical that happens to us, to our brains, to our emotions, to everything. And so what I have discovered in my life is that I need to keep putting myself in that place. And I'm doing it right now with painting, and I'm doing it with a new form of surfing called wing surf or wing foiling, keeping myself in the kook phase where I'm insecure and uncertain and not sure if I'm ever going to figure this out. And as a result, I've got this excitement about life. And so my point is that you have to know that when you go into this transition, you're cutting the cord. And when you start feeling alone and start feeling insecure, you have to realize you've hit the magic spot. That's not the place to avoid. It's the place to go head into, because that's where the stuff of life is. And that's how what scares us from making transitions is we don't want to experience that. We try to stay away from the fear. We try to stay away from the insecurity and uncertainty. But in fact, that's where you want to be. It's not easy, but you want to be. That's the place.
It's so important, Stacy. And I do know, in my own experience and people that I've worked with, we always want the soft landing pad ready for us before we make the transition. You know what I mean? Like, my life is going to start when I retire, or my life is going to start when I make $1 million. My life is going to start. It's always kind of putting it off in the futures when really just exactly what you're talking about is like jump off into the deep end. And
Yes.
that's really where it's at.
But also, a lot of times people think they need something. I need a certain confidence. I need a certain knowledge. I need something to do it. You don't need anything. You just need to do it. Because what will happen is if you put yourself out there, the world will inform you what to do. Your insides will inform you what to do. But it's just that thing of letting go. You can't control what's going to happen. And you have to know that in the weeks and months ahead, you're going to be untethered, but it's going to happen somehow, miraculously. It's going to happen. I've done it many, many times in my life. And the same thing replays itself over and over to the point now where I'm deliberately putting myself in that position. You know, I want to add one more thing. We're always saying, oh, if I could only be 16 again, if I could only be 18 again, we forget to realize how insecure and uncertain life was back then. So that's why if you want to be that again, then embrace what you had to embrace then, which was insecurity and uncertainty.
Stacy, you are hitting like right at something that we talk about week in and week out on the workshop. And I also wish that it wasn't too late for us to change the name of our week together to the kook phase. Maybe next time.
We'll do that next year.
Next year, let's three of us do the kook phase, a week of kook. We have found that, you know, we are rewarded for being prepared, for knowing, for being excellent at things. So many people who come to us to the workshops down to Baja that's part of that fear, right? Is to let go and to be a beginner. It's exactly what you're saying is one of the keys that we found that really turns up that transitional intelligence, right? Where you can be in that comfortable, uncomfortable place. Mm-hmm. So I love that you've brought that up.
Well, also, I mean, I've experienced it and I've experienced the joy that comes out of it. There's pure joy that comes out of this.
Yeah.
And when you're in that phase, you're in a phase of all possibilities. And if you cannot see, this is one of the secrets of life is we can't control things. We think we can. We really can't. It's an illusion. And so when you give up the need to control and you let your life path take you where it wants to take you, it becomes so much more invigorating. You know, I'll tell you one thing that I've always discovered too, because I not only was a skateboard champion, but I nurtured skateboard champions like Tony Hawk and Rodney Mullen and the like. And it's not about talent. It's about desire. How bad do you want something? As long as you can get up every morning and love the thing that you want and keep going towards it, that is more important than having talent. And it's more important than knowing what you're doing, because your desire is the fuel that's going to put you and get you to where you want to be.
Beautiful.
You know,
Beautiful.
It's been a personal experience, and it's been what I've experienced with these young kids. Tony Hawk, guys, he has no physical. He didn't have typical physical talent. In fact, he had so many physical attributes that went against him ever being any good. But his desire to be great was so overwhelming that it illuminated his path and forward, and it enabled him to get past all of his physical hangups. He's the complete wrong body for a skateboarder. He's tall and lanky. Skateboarders are better a little bit smaller. So,
Stacy, we have a question that's come in on the chat that I feel is so good that I'd love to just float it to you right now, which is, have you had kook transitions that didn't result in even modest mastery? And if so, did you still experience the same joy?
oh boy.
And that is from Bob Craig. Bob, thank you for that question.
I have not, and that's mostly because when I embark on something, I know I want it so badly that I just don't give up. Now, I will say this much. I can meet him halfway on that. I told you I learned to kiteboard. That was a 1.5 year process. That's a long time to figure something out. And in that entire time, I really didn't know if I was ever going to figure out. And finally, when I did figure it out, I suddenly didn't know if I liked it. And that really bothered me. I went, wait a minute, I've spent all this money, I put all this time in. I don't even know if I like this anymore. But I realized at the time I had not developed a specific technique, which was keeping me from being more fulfilled in it. I finally figured it out and it clicked. So I've been close to it, but things have taken a lot longer, and they've tried my patience a lot more. But again, I'm going through another one at this moment, learning something called wing foiling, which is very, very complicated. And again, it's got its scary attributes to it, and there's, in my mind, oh, you're too old for this. You can't do this. It's a young man's sport. All those things are in my mind going all the time, but I'm still doing it. And it's going to take, and I've already figured out, it's going to take a year to do this, probably, maybe more.
Very nice. Stacy, would you want to touch upon lifestyle turning into a business? So you have 1970s, mid 1970s, California's.
Actually, before you ask, Teddi, before you ask, can I just answer one more thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I exercise every single day. Okay. Every day. I have a routine I do. It takes 35 minutes. It's made a huge difference in my life. Most people who know me say to me, well, that's easy for you. You're a professional athlete. It's got to be easy. There is not a day I wake up in my life that I ever want to exercise. Ever. I never want to do it. And every day I wake up, my brain says, hey, come on, take today off. And then finally, when I start it, my brain says, oh, come on, cut the reps on this one. Go, or come on, let's get the muffin now. It'd be so much better. My point is this. My brain never stops trying to antagonize me. It never stops trying to thwart what I'm doing. It's always there. But what I found, I just got to do what I got to do. I have to do it. And I just got to stay true to it. Have to. But it's not easier for me. I can assure you of that. But sorry, Ted, I interrupted you.
No, I think I'm gonna piggyback on that, because I do know you're also a meditator, an avid meditator, and I think you can apply the same thing. I mean, I talk with our students here all the time about there's always going to be something else. Like, I often will be like, as I'm getting ready to sit on my cushion and do my 20 minutes or so, I'm like, well, that grout in the bathroom really needs to be cleaned right now. There's always something that you're, just like what you're saying, that your mind will jump in, and there's always something that'll take you away from really doing something healthy for yourself, yes. Working out, entertaining some stillness in your life, can you talk about your own practice?
In fact, I'd like to address that gentleman's question prior to that. Yeah. If I've had one, and I should have brought this up, it's meditation. I've been meditating my whole life. The last 10 years, I've been meditating for an hour to 2 hours a day. It's the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. It's an incredible Buddhist practice. And I say this not for the Buddhist reasons, but because it's so discouraging. Yeah. I reached a place about 6 years ago where I had 2 weeks of reaching a level of humility in myself that was so profound, I couldn't even articulate what I was experiencing. I have not been able to get to that place for 6 years. Yeah. And I work at that every single day. And and I want to get back to it because it was so unique and so special. But my point is, I think this answers his question. I still do it. As disappointing as it can be at times, I still do it because I know how good it is for me. And I think it's a lifelong struggle, thing to do.
I think the most discouraging, meditation gets such a bad rap, and it's so easy for us to just not even entertain it. But when we consider the culture we come from, the forward momentum, the being out in front of ourselves all the time, and just kind of saying, well, I think too much, I can't meditate. Well, I would imagine the Dalai Lama has an extremely active, luminous mind. It's not that this is a thinking machine. Just as the lungs and the diaphragm breathe this body, our minds are supposed to think. It's what it's supposed to do. And, be thankful that you have an active mind, right? But we do have the capacity, and I think this is what you experience is when you do kind of put everything down and you take a moment to just sit and recognize the body you're in, you see that you can let these thoughts come and go freely, and that you don't necessarily have to react to each individual thought. And that's where we start to experience this, I call it a sense of grace, but really space for creativity to come to the surface, space for wisdom to start to float up to the surface, kind of a little closer to who and what we really are, this thing of creating potential.
If you meditate long enough, you slowly start to realize what all the masters say, which is everything comes from stillness. It all comes from stillness. And when you finally reach stillness in yourself, you realize there's another place within us that's not the brain, and it's the real place. And so when you get to that, you can allow the brain to do what it wants, because you're now in that place of stillness. And so that is the whole point of meditation, is to reach that place and stay in that place where the mind can spin as much as it wants, but it's not affecting you because you're in that place of stillness.
We're starting to see a theme here, Christine, with this thing of discomfort. We're seeing that, we all know about these trends lately of people jumping in ice baths, jumping into the cold ocean, really like doing these practices that take us out of our comfort zone. What do you think about that, Christine?
Well, I'm a big proponent of type 2 fun, which is the kind of fun that's not always fun when we're doing it. And I think it can be tied to discomfort, either physical discomfort because it's difficult, or physically uncomfortable, like a cold plunge. Erin Pashley, I think you're on here, my queen of cold plunges. I love you, girl. Keeping us thinking about the cold plunge, or something that's just frightening. And again, I think these moments that kind of jar us out of our comfort and take us to a different place also help us maybe to reach stillness in a way, right? Whatever it is that helps us to get to that pause, that space between stimulus and response that we love to talk about so much. I think other threads that I hear emerging in this conversation are threads of creativity, right? Teddi, you and I have talked a lot about skateboarding and snowboarding actually being an art form and not so much a sport. I mean, obviously they're sports, we're sporties, we're secret jocks. But Stacy, do you want to talk a little bit about creativity? Because I mean, if we think about you, the thread from being a skateboard champ into being an entrepreneur, into being a filmmaker, the thread I see tying that all together is such deep creativity.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I learned early on, because again, I don't have a college education. I don't even have really a good education. I've shared this before, but in the 11th grade, I had to take an aptitude test, and it was discovered that I was reading at a 7th grade level. And I believe my writing skills were even below that. And so they put me in a remedial reading class to get me up to speed. My point of bringing that up is because I was aware when I left college that I had to educate myself because I was no longer in school. And so I developed a reading, an aptitude to read, a desire to read books. And so that's been a part of my life, but I'm falling off track here. But when I started my company, I was suddenly responsible for new products, 1 to 4 advertisements a month, creative advertisements, a video a year, and all sorts of shirt graphics and whatnot. And I had to learn what my creative process was in order to function. And I've learned that my creative process is the same whether I'm gardening, whether I'm drawing, or whether I'm doing a business thing, or whether I'm making a film. And the reason I bring this up is because each one of us has a creative process. And our creative processes are filled with a bunch of eccentricities. Mine, whenever I start something, very soon into the project, I condemn it. Oh, this sucks. This is going to be terrible. I do it with everything. Doesn't matter what I'm doing, whether it's gardening, painting, or drawing, or whatever. But I now know that's part of my process. Okay, I'm going through the judgment phase. And I realized I got to work through that. So I had to learn what all the obstacles were within my process so that I could get through those obstacles to the desired goal. And the funny thing is, those obstacles have never left me. They're still here. Every
Me
time I
neither.
try something
Yeah.
new, the same exact obstacles that I've experienced for years are there, but at least now I know that I can overcome them, that they're normal, that these are normal things in my life. And that's why I say you have to get to know your process, because all of us have these obstacles and stumbling blocks that come to us every time we learn something new, every time we do something.
I think
Stacy,
with my meditation practice, it reminds me time and time again, there's this mantra that I go through quite often. Is it really true? Is it really true? Because my mind is doing the same thing that you just talked about saying like, you suck at this, you're no good at this, the inner critic thing. And I'm always like, is it really true that I am not good enough? And I just don't attach to it the same way that I used to, maybe like I did 20 years ago.
Yeah, I get that. And I'm sure that works for you. For me, it was recognizing it. Oh, it's this again. It's that again. You know, when I'll tell you something, when I do a really big project like a film, typically when I'm done, it's like a balloon getting the air released out of it. I kind of go into a 3 months, slight depression.
Yeah.
Because I'm just spent. Well, I used to freak out about that. Like, oh my God, I'm in a depression. I'll never think of, have another idea. Now what happens is when I fall into that place, I let myself be it and be in it. I just be in that, I wallow in it. And I know in 3 months, I'll come out of it, something will happen and I'll fire back up again. But I'm not fighting it anymore. I'm not fighting against it. So that's been a very important thing. That's all part of understanding one's process.
do you mind if I jump in, Teddy? Because there's some threads that I see here around perspective, right? And why we're able to make better decisions in our 50s than we did in our 20s, because we have experience, we can name things. And with naming comes the power to recognize, to see those patterns. We talk about pattern recognition being one of our powers as we age. And I think what you're getting at, Stacy, also is potentially the power of mentorship, right? Like you figured this out on your own on the way, and maybe it would have been powerful for you, or maybe not. I certainly am not someone that takes coaching very well, but to have someone along the way to help point those things out instead of having to discover anything, right? So when I started this call saying like, we're the grownups now, well, I think we hold some of that power. I think it's why, keeping older workers in the workplace is important, is this kind of emotional intelligence and pattern recognition. You have anything to say about that?
No. Well, first of all, I would have loved to have had a mentor in my life. And, occasionally when I did meet older people that I was able to get things from, it had a very powerful effect on me. But most of the information I was able to get was from books.
Yeah.
And from meditation and from just paying attention to life experience. It was just paying attention and taking the time to untangle what it is I learned, untangle what happened in a specific experience to figure out, did I have anything to do with this? If I did, what did I have to do with here? And figure that out so that I can understand how I operate. Remember, we're learning this on the fly.
Yeah.
We're living our lives while we're riding this wave. It's not like we get to step off the wave and analyze it. We are riding the wave the entire time. We're figuring out how to ride the wave.
Yeah.
And that's why life is so crazy. And a lot of people can't take riding the wave. And so they try to jump off on the pier. But you do that and it all passes you by. That's not fun.
Yeah.
But if you're going to ride the wave, you're going to get wiped out. You're going to, get dragged on the reef. You're going to experience the whole thing. It's all part of it.
Can I?
Go ahead.
I just think this. I wanted to bring up you're back involved in skateboarding again now, but you left skateboarding. And can you tell me to become a filmmaker? Can you talk about? And you were financially comfortable. You could have coasted the rest of your life. pretty much. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was I had a business partner, and towards the end of the company, towards the end of my time there, we weren't seeing eye to eye on things, and it was creating a lot of friction between us. And I knew I can stay here for the rest of my life, and I'm going to be comfortable, and I'm going to, it's going to be all good and stuff like that. But I really had to ask myself, is there anything more here I really want to do? And there wasn't. And I didn't love it anymore. I just didn't. I loved everything I had done. I did more than I ever thought possible in that business. I grew up, I learned so many skills, but I didn't love it anymore, and I couldn't see myself doing it anymore. And I just decided I want to do something else. Now, that future was not in any way, shape, or form handed to me or guaranteed. I knew very little about it going into it, but I knew some things, and I decided to take that chance. And it was a really big chance. I was newly married and had a mortgage and everything. It was not the ideal time to make a transition.
Into filmmaking.
Yes. And so the next 7 years, I struggled in television. I didn't like what I was doing because I felt there were handcuffs behind me, creatively, but I learned a tremendous amount. And so I struggled through those years. And finally, after year 7, I finally did my first film, and I was finally in the place where I wanted to be. It took a long time.
What was that film, and what happened with that film at Sundance?
It was Dogtown and Z-Boys. It was my first documentary, and we were not even going to submit it to the Sundance Festival until this friend of mine, a filmmaker, saw it and said, "You have to submit it." And I said, "No, I don't want to submit it." She goes, "Why?" And I go, "Because I don't want to start the new year with a no. And I know they're not going to take this." And she goes,
"This is crazy. I heard you say this before."
I didn't think anybody would take it serious. I didn't think people were going to like the film. I didn't. That's the truth. So anyways, to make a long story short, she would not let me go. We submitted it, and we got into our surprise. And so then we went to Sundance, but everyone warned us, if your film plays at Sundance and it doesn't do well, it's going to go to a graveyard. And they said, you got to go walk up and down the street with sandwich boards saying, "Come see our film." Okay. So then we're freaked out. Now we're freaked out about going to Sundance. So we get there, and we're in the registration area, and there's all these extremely cool people, which we're not. Okay. We finally get up to the head of the line, and they say, "Which film are you with?" And I said, "Dogtown." And the woman goes, "What?" I said, "Dogtown." And she goes, "Oh." And I thought, oh my God, it's over. And she goes, "Wow, you're lucky." And I go, "Why is that?" And she goes, "All your screenings are sold out." And I went, "Is there another Dogtown film here? Are you sure you have ours?" That's what happened. We didn't expect it. And so it opened up a lot more doors after that. And so I became an overnight success after 7 years.
Yeah. Amazing.
But let me go back to one thing I know you guys talk about too. Okay. And this idea of failure. Okay. I'm sure that plays into your curriculum.
Yes.
We all fail. You can't make changes in your life. You cannot grow without failing. Okay. Super, super important. Well, years ago, I've done so many interviews for my films and promoting my films and stuff. I've been asked a lot of times in my life, what's the key to your success? And years ago, I really didn't have a satisfactory answer for that. But I made a film about the gangs of LA that was a real struggle to get released. We finally got it released, but the whole thing was a real struggle. And I was being interviewed after that film, and the person said, "What's the key to your success?" And I told him, "A key to my success is failure." And he laughed and he goes, "What do you mean by that?" And I go, "The key to my success is I've learned how to manage failure." And he goes, "But wait a minute, you've been successful." And he explained all this stuff. And I said, "Look, you're seeing all of my exclamation points, skateboarder, company. You don't see the dips. You don't see the 7 years in television where I struggled. You don't see the years where, the 4 years before the company succeeded, where we almost went out of business month after month." I go, it's really dealing with failure that enabled me to get to those successes. It's a terrible thing to have to go through, but you have to learn to manage when you go through it, to recognize it, to know what it is, and know how to get yourself through it. Because it's this that screws you up and can knock you out while you're getting pounded by something that you weren't expecting. And so, in Silicon Valley, they say fail and fail fast. I don't think that's true. My thing is learn how to manage yourself when you fail. And you'll manage yourself out of it so you can get to where you want to be. It's unavoidable. That's the thing. It's unavoidable.
All right. Well, you guys just indulge me for a second, because this is going to be a little bit corny, but come with me on this journey, right? So learning to ride half pipe was really about learning how to fall for me, right? You have to learn how to fall safely. And then, so this ties into your idea of learning to fail, right? Is learning to fall.
Bingo.
But also, this is where it's going to get really corny. I think about transitions a lot because it is now my profession to think about transitions. But as a snowboarder, without transition in the half pipe, like the transition is the key to the air and also the key to the safe reentry, right? Yep. So there is no better friend to me when I'm on my snowboard in a half pipe than transition. So here we are, we approach it with a bunch of fear in our lives, but as an experiential learner, I think about it often as the thing that like both launches me and brings me back in safely so I can launch again. Too corny? Can you guys handle it?
Exactly it.
No, it's wonderful metaphor.
I actually want to add something to what you said, because I was actually going to bring this up before I talked about failure. When we started developing pool riding, skateboarding inside empty swimming pools, okay, the most important technique of all techniques for us was learning how to fall. Yeah. Because when you fall in a pool, you don't fall from the bottom, you fall from the top. And when you fall into a 10-foot deep pool, you're falling through midair directly onto concrete, not water. And so when we did that, and this is the day and age before helmets, pads, and all that stuff, we were essentially riding boards that we built with roller skate equipment on the bottom of them, okay? So it's primitive stuff. It's the stuff that Fred and Barney would have used in the Flintstones. That's what we were using.
Yeah.
So the first trick we had to learn and master was falling, and that was rolling out of your fall. Because if you hit, you were finished. And a lot of kids would hit the pavement and they'd never come back again. That one thing knocked them out. And it's a great metaphor for life. You have to learn to manage the fall. You have to learn to roll through it. You still get bruised up, but you still get to stay in the game.
Yeah.
I'd like to piggyback on that, because I think a lot of our viewers in our community may not know, 1970s California, we were in the middle of a drought. Everybody emptied their swimming pools.
Well, they couldn't fill them. It was against the law to fill them.
Oh, they couldn't fill them. So this is the way, this is like beginner's mind. These are like the wild, creative mind as a child. Is all of these guys looked at an empty pool differently. They were like, it was not an object. It
wasn't a container to hold water. It was a container to draw lines through it on a skateboard.
It was, we could be creative with this kind of phenomena that was happening in California. So I just think that is like, it's so crazy. If you contemplate that a bunch of kids just saw empty pools and saw this in a creative way where they're like, I can skate that. I can kind of act like I'm surfing on that. This is how this whole phenomena of skateboarding, and now how it's it's an Olympic sport these days, how this transpired. Like that is really truly.
Don't forget, it was also very illegal. We did it completely illegally.
Yeah, these were not pools that you've been invited to.
Yeah, we were not welcome in any of the backyards that we invited ourselves into. So it was, we also had the attention of the police on us all the time. So it was developed in a very outlaw manner. Yeah.
You guys, we really should open up to questions. This is so spicy and wonderful. And I'm so excited we get to do this for a week together. Before we go to questions, and before we talk about Charlie's Angels, because we do have to close out with a little bit of Charlie's Angels. I want to talk about authenticity. Stacy, one of the things that I love so much about action sports is what I've always called the bullshit meter, right? It just feels to me like the bullshit meter in action sports is so at the core of action sports, not at like the hanger-on level of action sports and the industries that are trying to come in and kind of glom on, but that very sensitive bullshit meter. Do you feel like that commitment to authenticity, which I see in all your work, and maybe I'm just putting that on there, but do you feel like that has served you well, or is that something that traveled with you from skateboarding?
Well, you always have to be aware of it, because if you're not being authentic to what you're doing, you're not going to succeed at what you're doing. You have to be true to it. You have to be authentic to it. If that's what you're saying, I mean, that was the golden rule.
Right.
Because if you're not going to be taken seriously. Your products aren't going to be taken seriously. Your career is not going to be taken seriously. So you have to be true to it and authentic to it. And you have to remain that way throughout. But it's very easy to get seduced by the money, seduced by the attention and all that stuff. But that's not authentic. You know, the doing it is what's authentic. That's what's real.
Oh, all right. We've got 2 minutes for questions.
Yes, so if anybody has a question, thank you. This has been so good. Please raise your reactions hand. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a reactions button. Just raise your hand so we can see, and then we'll call you up. Here's Diane. You just unmute, and I'm going to pull you up to Spotlight. Diane.
Excuse me. Hi there. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom. Stacy, you touched on a little bit about the inner critic, and I'd love to hear you share what sort of tools or techniques have worked for you. I know we touched on meditation, but what has been most helpful for you to navigate and befriend your inner critic?
I don't think I've ever befriended it, because I just don't like it. I don't want to be friends with it. I think what it is I've just come to the conclusion, and I came to this conclusion years ago, that it's not leaving. It's just there. And it's going to continue saying and doing the same things it's always done. But now I recognize it. I go, it's there again. And I just go through it and just keep going. And what I don't do is I don't fight it and try to smother it. I don't fight it and try to think that I have the power to get rid of it, because I don't think I do. So I just realize there it is again. And it's not going to leave. And I'm not at fault for it not leaving. It just is there. But I'm not going to let it stop me. And then when I accomplish what I accomplish, I might look back and go, see, you didn't get me that time. So it's not a situation where I've never been one of those people that feels I can defeat it. I can only get through it. So that's the way I've operated. You know,
I had a teacher kind of describe dealing with the inner critic and negative thoughts like that. He's like, it's like boxing a tree. You know, like you're just gonna lose. Like, so don't even try. You know?
Yeah, but I will say one thing: deep meditation, that does help, because I have found that really grounds me, and that voice becomes less vocal. Not less vocal, it becomes less voluminous. That really helps, because it goes further away. And the less I meditate, that thing comes further, it comes closer to me. You know?
Fair enough.
Thank you, Diane.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you, Diane.
Janet, come on up.
Hi. I'm listening to this conversation about authenticity, and kind of a two-pronged question. One is, do you sense a difference between authenticity and that in the moment, not thinking about anything else like extreme sports and many other things invite us to do? And the other prong is, what is your sensation? What is the inner clue when you experience authenticity?
That's a great question. Okay. Is that question to me or to
anybody who wants to answer?
Okay.
I vote for Stacy.
All right. I'm gonna share this. I'll try to share this with you guys as quickly as I can. once again, because of my background in skateboarding, I was asked for years, what was it about skateboarding that grabbed you? And it took me years to finally figure out how to articulate that question that goes right to what you're saying. When I was 7 years old, I was skateboarding down the street from my house in front of a drugstore. And I was skating on a very crowded Saturday, and there was people all over the sidewalk, people with strollers and market baskets, and I'm cruising and weaving through these people. I'm on this little invention called a skateboard. The wheels are rattling and the vibrations are coming up through my feet. And unlike a bicycle where you're sitting on something and holding handlebars with your feet on pedals, this standing on this rolling little magic carpet is very insecure and very uncertain. And as I'm doing this, I'm a young kid, I suddenly get overwhelmed with this feeling of stillness inside of me. I had stillness inside of me. How could I have stillness inside of me when I was weaving around all these people, all this chaos, and at any moment I could fall and slam into a metal market basket? It was like a drug.
Yeah.
That's what I chased. Every time I get on a skateboard, I somehow relax and go to that sense of stillness. And when I'm in that place, I know I'm in the place I'm supposed to be. That's why I love the sports that have movement and scariness to them when you have things coming towards you. Some reason, in the sense of all that chaos, it sends me to the center. And so that's what happens. So when I reach that center, I realize I'm in the right place.
Okay, as we're winding down, we do need to talk about Charlie's Angels.
Oh, please.
It's so great because it was so many of ours. Farrah Fawcett was on that.
Yeah.
The best-selling poster of all times.
Yes.
I was a walk-on. They gave me a part with, they needed a skateboard kid to come down the sidewalk and prevent a hitman from killing a prince. And I just happened to fit the model. They looked at me and they said, he's right for the part. Here's your line. Go, kid. And I did it. And that was it.
Well, I mean, this just goes to show what a huge shaper of culture you are. You know, really from...
I just walked into that. I was the lucky one.
It all started by all of you guys in Santa Monica looking at empty pools in a different way than anybody else was. And then here we are now in midlife, and you're coming to spend a week with us here in Baja and offer your wisdom.
Yeah.
And we just deeply, deeply appreciate you.
I thank you. I'm so looking forward to it. You know, again, because as I told you, I didn't do too well in school. And as a result of that, I didn't think I had much of a future for myself. I really expected myself. I think I've told you, Teddy, I was planning on being a plumber. Not that there's anything wrong with being a plumber, but I was going to be a tradesman. I thought that was my place in life. When skateboarding opened up, it opened up the world to me. And I realized this is the greatest job in the world. And I have to take it very seriously. And I did take it seriously when a lot of my peers didn't. You know, they got caught up in it. And so as a result of it, I've tried to take what I do seriously so that I can continue moving and growing and becoming. So,
beautiful.
Yeah.
Christine?
And that, I think we want to respect everyone's time, respect Stacy's time. Thank you so much. We did put the link to our Instagram in there where you can find the walk-on clip there where Stacy's being quite modest. As Teddy said, that is culture shaking, zeitgeist shit that caused that to happen in that moment. Stacy, we cannot wait to spend the week in Baja with you.
It's mutual. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks all for joining. Leslie and the MEA team, thank you. Question, people.
I think we do have a few spots left.
Thank you all for being here. See you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Stacey.
you, everybody.